Hello, my name is Kathy, and today I'll be continuing the course on music theory. But before I do this, I wanted to let you know that because I have a great many videos now on many different topics, I've decided to make several different video playlists so that it's easy to find the videos of greatest interest. So please check out my playlist page. This course breaks itself into three major parts. The first part is basic music theory. The second part is arranging music, and the third part is music composition. In this lesson, we will continue to learn about basic music theory. Musical notes, like all sounds, are made of sound waves. The sound waves that make musical notes are very evenly spaced waves, and the qualities of these regular waves, for example, how big they are or how far apart they are, affect the sound of the note. A note can be high or low, depending on how frequently one of its waves arrives at your ear. When scientists and engineers talk about how high or low a sound is, they talk about its frequency. The higher the frequency of the note, the higher it sounds. They can measure the frequency of notes, and like most measurements, these will be numbers like 4 vibrations per second and things like that. A sound that has a shorter wavelength has a higher frequency and a higher pitch. But people have been making music and talking about music since long before we knew that sounds were waves with frequencies. So when musicians talk about how high or low a note sounds, they usually don't talk about frequency. They talk about the note's pitch. And instead of numbers, they give the note names like A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Notes that are one octave apart are so closely related to each other that musicians gave them the same name. A note that is an octave higher or lower than a note named C natural will also be named C natural. A note that is one or more octaves higher or lower than F sharp will also be called F sharp. When two notes are one octave apart, one has a frequency exactly 2 times higher than the other. It has twice as many waves. These waves fit together so well in the instrument and in the air and in your ears that they sound almost like different versions of the same note. The word octave comes from a Latin root meaning 8. The octave was named by musicians who are more interested in how octaves are divided into scales than into how their frequencies are related. Octaves aren't the only notes that sound good together. The people in different musical traditions have different ideas about what notes they think sound best together. In the Western musical tradition, which includes most familiar music from Europe and the Americas, the octave is divided up into 12 equally spaced notes. If you play all 12 of these notes within one octave, you are playing a chromatic scale. Other musical traditions, traditional Chinese music for example, have divided the octave differently, and so they use different scales. Whether it is a popular song, a classical symphony, or an old folk tune, most of the music that feels comfortable and familiar to Western listeners is based on either a major or minor scale. It is tonal music that mostly uses only 7 of the notes within an octave. Only one of the possible A's, either an A sharp, an A natural, or an A flat, one of only the possible B's, either a B sharp, a B natural, or a B flat, and so on. The other notes in the chromatic scale are usually used sparingly to add interest or to temporarily change the key in the middle of the music. The pitch of a note is how high or low it sounds. Musicians often find it useful to talk about how much higher or lower one note is than another. This distance between two pitches is called the interval between them. In Western music, the small interval from one note to the next closest note higher or lower is called a half step or a semitone. In this example, we have 3 half-step intervals
shown on a piano keyboard and also written on the staff. These semitones are between C and C sharp or D flat, and between E and F, and finally between G sharp or A flat and A. As you can see on the staff, these semitones can be on the same line and sometimes not.
So a scale that goes up or down by half steps is called a chromatic scale, and it plays all the notes on both the white and black keys of a piano keyboard. It also plays all the notes easily available on most Western instruments. A few instruments like trombone and violin can easily play pitches that aren't in the chromatic scale, but even they usually don't. And now we come to the study of scales. The word scale comes from the Latin word scala, which means ladder. A scale in music is a ladder of notes, or a series of notes with steps of a definite pattern between any starting note and the octave above or below it. Of course, it goes without saying that any scale may be extended for 2, 3, or more octaves. The scales that we use in most Western music are diatonic scales, and they break down into two major types of scales, the major scale and the minor scales. First, we'll look at the major scales. When you listen to music, it invokes a feeling within you. Sometimes it is a basically happy sound, and at other times it can be sad or mournful sound. How are these moods produced? Music in a particular key tends to use only some of the many possible notes available. These notes are listed in the scale associated with that key. In major keys, the notes of the scale are often used to build bright-sounding major chords. They also give a strong feeling of having a tonal center, a tone or chord that feels like home, or the resting place in that key. The bright-sounding major chords and the strong feeling of tonality are what give major keys their happy, pleasant moods. This contrasts with the moods usually suggested by music that uses minor keys, scales, and chords. Although it also has a strong tonal center, music in a minor key is more likely to sound sad, ominous, or mysterious. In fact, most musicians and even many non-musicians can distinguish major and minor keys just by listening to the music. A scale starts with the note that names the key. This note is the tonal center of that key. The note where music in the key feels at rest. It is also called the tonic, and it's the do in do re mi. For example, music in the key of A major almost always ends on an A major chord, the chord built on the note A. It often also begins on that chord, returns to that chord often, and features a melody and a bass line that also return to the A often enough that listeners will know where the tonal center of the music is, even if they don't realize that they know it.
All scales have a definite pattern of tones and semitones. To find the rest of the notes in a major key, start on the tonic note and go up following this pattern. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. This will take you to the tonic one octave higher than where you began, and includes all the notes in the key in that octave. These major scales all follow the same pattern of whole steps and half steps or tones and semitones. They have different sets of notes because the pattern starts on different notes. All major scales have the same pattern of half steps and whole steps or tones and semitones, beginning on the note that names the scale, the tonic. Now is the time for you to practice writing some major scales. On your manuscript paper for each of these notes, write a major scale, one octave, ascending, going up, beginning on that note. If you're not sure where a note should be written as a flat, sharp, or natural, remember that you won't ever skip a line or space, nor will you write two notes of the scale on the same line or space. If you need help keeping track of half steps or semitones, use a keyboard or a picture of a keyboard to help you keep things straight in your mind. Remember, when you write your scales, that the stem of the note you write will change at the middle line of the staff, either up or down, depending. I'll include the answers so that you can check your work. And here are the answers to your writing of the major scales.
The scales that you just wrote out in the previous exercise have been written using accidentals where they are necessary. In a piece of music, this can get very confusing. To eliminate this confusion and make things easier to read, musicians developed something called a key signature. In a piece of music, all the accidentals are placed at the beginning of each staff immediately after the clef sign in what is called a key signature, which simply means a sign which shows the key of the piece of music, and it shows all the notes which should be played as sharps or as flats throughout the piece of music. You might ask yourself at this point, why bother with all these accidentals? Why not just write everything in the key of C major, with no sharps or flats to bother with? What difference does the key of a piece of music make anyway? Since the major scales all follow the same pattern, they all sound very much alike. So why bother with different keys at all? Before equal temperament became the standard tuning system, major keys sounded more different from each other than they do now. Even now, there are subtle differences between the sound of a piece of one key or another, mostly because of differences in the timbre of various notes of the instrument or voices involved. But today, the most common reason to choose a particular key is simply that the music is easier to sing or play in that key, or that the composer wants to stimulate very specific frequencies of sound in the listener to dramatize a particular emotion.
In this diagram, we see the circle of fifths, which is an easy way to arrange keys to show how close they are related to each other. If you do not know the order of the sharps and flats, you can also use the circle of fifths to find these. The first step in a key signature is always F sharp. The second sharp in a key signature is always a perfect fifth away, or a C sharp. The third is always G sharp, and so on, all the way to B sharp. The first flat in a key signature is always B flat, the same as the last sharp. The second is always E flat, and so on, all the way to F flat. Notice that just as with the key signatures, you add sharps or subtract flats as you go clockwise around the circle, and add flats or subtract sharps as you go counterclockwise. Each sharp and a flat that is added to a key signature is also a perfect fifth away from the last sharp or flat that was added. In this diagram, we show the key signatures for the major scales that have sharps. When the sharps are written in a key signature, it means that all of the indicated sharps throughout the music, no matter where these notes may be placed on the staff, will be sharpened. You will also notice that the sharps in the key signature are not written in the order in which they appear in the scale. They are written according to the circle of fifths. The scale which has one sharp is the G major scale, and the scale being the first sharp is an F sharp. The scale which has two sharps is the D major scale, and it is F and C sharp. The scale which has three sharps is the A major scale, and it is F, C, and G sharp. The scale which has 4 sharps is the E major scale, and it has F, C, G, and D sharp. The scale which has 5 sharps is the B major scale, and it has F, C, G, D, and A sharp. The scale which has 6 sharps is the F sharp major scale, and it has F, C, G, D, A, and E sharp. These sharps must always be written in the same position on the staff as shown in this diagram. In your manuscript pad, practice writing out all the key signatures several times until you have the formula down. In this diagram, we show the key signatures for the major scales that have flats. When the flats are written in a key signature, it means that all of the indicated flats throughout the music, no matter where these notes may be placed on the staff, will be flattened. You will also notice that the flats in the key signature are not written in the order in which they appear in the scale. They are written according to the circle of fifths. The scale which has 1 flat is the F major scale, and that flat, being the first flat, is a B flat. The scale which has 2 flats is the B flat major scale, and it has a B and E flat. The scale which has 3 flats is the E flat major scale, and it has B, E, and A flat. The scale which has 4 flats is the E flat major scale, and it has B, E, A, and D flat. The scale which has 5 flats is the D flat major scale, and it has B, E, A, D, and G flat. The scale which has 6 flats is the G flat major scale, and it has B, E, A, D, G, and D flat. These flats must always be written in the same position on the staff as shown in this diagram. In your manuscript pad, practice writing out all these key signatures several times until you have the formula down. Here are the musical terms to memorize for this week. Moderato, moderate or medium. Allegretto, not as fast as allegro. Maestoso, with dignity in a stately manner. Giocoso, playful in a joking manner.
I have a great many videos now on many different topics, and so I've decided to make several different video playlists so that it's easier to find the videos of greatest interest. So please check out my playlist page. Well, that's it for now. To stay up to date with my latest videos, make sure to subscribe to this free YouTube channel by clicking the red subscribe button right below this video. Take care.